City Board of Directors regular meeting for Wednesday, June the 30th, 2021 at 4 p.m. and 4:04, I should say. And I call the meeting to order. Please stand for the pledge. I have asked Director Byron to lead us.
Please stand and repeat with me. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
President Reed?
Here.
Vice President Huff?
Here.
Director McComb?
Here.
Director Byron?
Here.
And let the record show that your record stand adopted.
Number one is the approval of the agenda. I will entertain a motion and a second.
I'll make the motion.
Second. It's been moved by Vice President Huff and seconded by Director Byron. Roll call, please.
President Reed?
Yes.
Director Byron?
Yes.
Director McComb?
Yes.
And Vice President Huff?
Yes.
Okay, let's go on with public comment. This is the opportunity for members of the public to address the board on matters within the board's jurisdiction that are not listed on the agenda. Please limit comments to 3 minutes or less. State law prohibits the board of directors from discussing or taking action on items not included on the agenda. Are there any emails or any phone calls, or is there any individuals out in the foyer that would like to make comments at this point?
I believe all public comment for this evening is relative to an agenda item.
Okay, a little bit later on, okay? So there's no one on the phone or on email that we have who wants to speak. Okay, let's go on to department action items. Number 3A is public hearing 2020 Urban Water Management Plan, Water Shortage Contingency Plan and Addendum to 2015 Urban Water Management Plan, presented by Tony Kohler, Assistant General Manager of Operations. Do you want to say anything before we go into the hearing?
No, we'll go, down middle.
Just go into the hearing?
Yeah, please.
All right.
Yes. Mr. Huff?
Turn it off. I'll leave it.
It's on.
No.
All right. This is the time and the place fixed for the public hearing relating to the High Desert Water District's draft 2020 Urban Water Management Plan, Water Shortage Contingency Plan, and Addendum to 2015 Urban Water Management Plan. This public hearing will be conducted for the following purposes. A, to ensure the active involvement of diverse social, cultural, and economic elements of the population within the district's service area with respect to the district's 2020 Urban Water Management Plan process. B, to receive oral and written testimony from members of the public and any interested agencies regarding any and all aspects of the district's draft 2020 Urban Water Management Plan, also the Water Shortage Contingency Plan, and the addendum for the Urban Water Management Plan. Letter C, to allow for community input regarding the district's implementation plan for complying with Part 2.55 of the Water Code, referred to as SBX 7-7 or the 20x2020 law. D, to consider the potential economic impacts of the district's implementation plan for complying with SBX 7-7 and E, to consider which methods would pursuant to Water Code Section 10608.20, B, for determining the district's urban water use targets under SBX 7-7. I'd like to call on the district's general manager to give a short summary of the actions that have led to this hearing.
Thank you, President. Notice of this public hearing has been provided pursuant to Water Code Sections 10608.26 and 10642 on Government Code Section 6066. The notice was published in the High Desert Star, a paper of general circulation on June 9th and June 16th of 2021. The draft 2020 Urban Water Management Plan and Water Shortage Contingency Plan and addendum have been available for public inspection at the district's office during normal business hours In addition, electronic copy of the draft 2020 Urban Water Management Plan and related documents have been available on the district's website at www.hdwd.com.
The procedures to be followed during this hearing will be as follows. Upon opening the public hearing, staff will present a report and recommendations relative to the proposed 2020 Urban Water Management Plan and to the wastewater and addendum and the proposed methods to adopt underwater code section 10008.20B for determining the district's urban water use targets under SCX 7-7. The hearing will then be open to public written comments from the audience. Members of the public are not required to provide oral testimony in order to voice an opinion regarding these drafts or any of the matters addressed at this hearing. Any person may submit comments by filing them in writing to the secretary of the district or by addressing their comments to the board of directors at this hearing. We ask that any written comments regarding these drafts be submitted to and received by the district no later than start of this meeting. I would now like to call on the district's general manager to provide a report and recommendations regarding the 2020 Urban Water Management Plan and the Water Shortage Contingency Plan and the addendum to the 2015 Urban Water Management Plan.
There are two parts that we will be reviewing here. Part A, which I am passing on to Tony, and after that part is done, I will deal with part B.
Good evening. Tonight, staff recommends the board to approve the 2020 Urban Water Management Plan and supporting documents. And right now, I'd like to introduce Gwen Moore with Tully and Young for a presentation on our Urban Water Management Plan.
Hey, thank you very much. I hope you all can hear me there. My name is Gwen Moore Tully. I'm with Tully and Young Water Planning, founding principal, and my business partner on the line with me is Mr. Greg Young, founding principal. You'll probably recognize occasionally we go back and forth and talking about this Urban Water Management Plan and what we have put in it. So we're ready and willing to go through a presentation and then answer questions as they arise from the board and the public. And I just want to start by saying thank you very much to your staff, to Tony and Ron and others. This is not a project or a matter that is just taken outside and somebody does it. It takes a lot of back and forth, a lot of communication, and everybody at the district has been really responsive. So with that said, let me jump into this, our presentation. We'll try to keep it pretty brief. The Urban Water Management Planning Act was enacted in 1983 and requires water districts that have 3,000 connections or more to develop urban water management plans every 5 years. And so we are doing this for the district and I've been working on it. But the reality is sort of the baseline item that the Urban Water Management Planning Act requires and we must demonstrate is that there's enough supply to serve the demands. And when there is enough supply to serve the demands, then we can conclude that the supplies are reliable. And we look at this planning horizon. I'll get to these in a second and get you on. We look at the planning horizon essentially through a 25-year planning period. The Act only requires a 20-year planning period, as you see in this slide, but we add an additional 5 years, and that's important for various local land use planning items that have to happen. There are new requirements this year. Whoops, if you can go back a slide, that'd be great. There are new requirements this year. You need to do a 5-year drought planning analysis, essentially assuming there's a drought over the next 5 years. What do your supplies and demands look like? You have to do a much more detailed water shortage plan. There are new criteria within the Water Code and the Urban Water Management Planning Act about what that needs to look like. And I think we're talking about that a little bit more tonight. And then we move forward with an annual analysis each year, starting in 2022. What does a normal year look like and what does a dry year look like for the district?
Greg, Mr. Tully seems to have frozen up. I'm not sure if that's, sorry, was that frozen on everybody or just me?
I think it might be frozen on you.
Okay, I apologize.
You're frozen, Greg. What the heck? All right. Next slide, please. All right. So this is the key important point for all this is this is High Desert Water District's water planning document. It's your document. It's a local document. It may be statutorily required. The state wants to see what the final results are, but in the end, this is a representation of what you want as a district to provide to your public and to each other. It considers High Desert Water District's unique circumstances. What's the history? What are the anticipated things we're looking at in the future? What are the trends? And then, of course, you integrate with regional planning actions. And there's been a lot of effort put into this to coordination with Mojave Water Agency and other local purveyors. Okay, well, this is a picture of the district. It overlies essentially 3 groundwater basins, and interestingly, the Ames Valley Basin and the Warren Valley Basin are the sources of supply. The Warren Valley Basin, as you all know, is subject to an adjudication, and I always like to look at these things, being a water rights lawyer, because the adjudication does not follow the actual boundaries of the Warren Valley Groundwater Basin, and the Ames-Retchie Agreement does not follow the boundaries of the Ames Valley Basin. So it's interesting to look at those things just from a legal and technical perspective, but the supplies derived from these basins are your fundamental baseline supplies, and the management of these basins is really what this district is all about. Next slide. So what are our fundamental findings? There are substantial supplies in the Warren Valley in particular. There are sufficient supplies in the Ames-Retchie area, or per that agreement. Our per capita water demands are decreasing, even though the total water demands within the district are increasing, and that means the per person water demands essentially are decreasing. There's reliable water supplies for a 5-year drought for the next 5 years, and you have reliable water supplies through 2045. But I add this last one in, and I think this has been a hallmark of this district. The supplies require active management from High Desert, and I think since its inception, this has been a very important piece that this district undertakes. Next slide. So what does our current forecast water use look like? You can see we break down the supplies, the demands, pardon me, into various categories as we're looking at this. But your current demand overall is about 2947 acre feet per year. And your future projected demand into 2045 looks about 3,400, 3,350. So there's not a super large increase in demands over time. And then importantly, you have a requirement this year to meet a GPCD requirement, the 20 by 2020, as the board was just talking about. And your target was 128 gallons per capita per day, and it's 103. So you meet the requirement going away from it, so to speak. Next slide. And what do the water supplies look like? Under the Warren Valley adjudication, the 1622 acre feet per year, then almost over 100,000 acre feet of stored water, which every time I look at that number, I find myself thinking that can't possibly be right, but it gets proven up again and again in the Water Masters reports. The Ames-Retchie, you have a 703 acre feet per year, and then about 1,500 acre feet of stored water. The Morongo Basin Pipeline, clearly an important piece of the water management strategy of the district, and it allows additional water to come from Mojave Water Agency each year, and then recycled water in the new treatment plant and how that's going to be managed over time. We did not look at, sorry, if you can just go back a slide real quick. We did not look at the recycled water right now as a future supply, even though we recognize that that will be in place down the line, just to demonstrate the sheer sufficiency and volumes of supply available to the district. Okay, next slide, thanks. I love this picture to show the Morongo Basin Pipeline and where it comes into the district, the recharge ponds. I think the new turnout, or the turnout that exists in the Ames Valley area, and the ability to move water around. This is the 71-mile pipeline is still an engineering feat that is very impressive in the desert, and certainly has added to the availability and reliability of supplies. Next slide. So what are we looking at? Combined supplies. This includes stored water in both basins, and a look into time. It's potential, and we're looking at huge numbers based on some of these questions, that in 2045, potential supplies could be as high as 160,000 acre feet of water available to the district. Right now, you have enough water for 25 years of supply to meet demand stored in the ground, which is a significant volume. Next slide. What does the supply reliability look like? Well, we don't show this as a surplus. We essentially are noting that the supply you have available equals the demand that you're looking to meet. And the difference, although would be significant, we hold it at zero, just to demonstrate that we don't want to use those reserve supplies, if possible, in managing the long-term reliability of the district's users. Next slide. Okay, I think the next large piece of the Urban Water Management Plan this year is the Water Shortage Contingency Plan. And we took a long look at your ordinance, Chapter 5.70, your Water Use Restrictions Ordinance, and have created some modifications to address the statutory requirements under the Urban Water Management Planning Act this year. So there are now 6 stages of implementation as compared to previous less stages in the past, with this smallest stage being a 10% demand reduction within a crisis or emergency stage with greater than 50% demand reduction. And on top of that, we like to look at the enforcement authorities. That's another requirement of the Urban Water Management Planning Act, and how those can be used to enforce water use restrictions within the district service area. We've added a communications plan. How would you inform your customers that they need to conserve more water or to take additional steps? We recognize that with the supplies you have on hand, you really don't need to be doing any of this, but occasionally the governor will declare that it's time for all of us to conserve. And in that situation, you'll have the ability to do it to meet those requirements, and a communication plan to help it happen. And then last, the penalties for violation in Ordinance 5.70.020, notices, stages of fines, and eventually termination of service, although that would be a drastic act. Next slide. Thank you. One other thing I just want to reach out and discuss here briefly, in the appendix to the Urban Water Management Plan is something called the Delta Reliance Analysis. And this is a requirement for the state water project importers, in particular Mojave Water Agency, that's relevant to you. The document that's included in the Urban Water Management Plan tiers from the analysis in Mojave Water Agency's Urban Water Management Plan. And this has been an ongoing synthesis between the urban purveyors and the wholesale agencies. So with that said, we're here to answer questions. We're here to discuss conclusions and whatever else is necessary in this public hearing.
All right, Mr. President, the record contains the following documents. Copies of the public hearing notices published in the High Desert Star, comments received from members of the public or other public agencies, the 2020 draft Urban Water Management Plan, the 2020 draft Water Shortage Contingency Plan, and addendum to the 2015 Urban Water Management Plan.
Will the general manager please report whether any written comments regarding these drafts were submitted in advance of this public hearing?
Mr. President, no submitted comments in writing have been received by staff.
The public hearing will now be open to take public testimony from anyone joining the meeting. If you would like to speak, please state your name, town of residence for the record, and limit your comments to 3 minutes or less. Is there any public members that would like to speak at this time? Do we have any emails?
All right, seeing no emails and the lines are open, should you have any public comment, please unmute yourself and state your name.
Hearing none, let's go to the individuals that have come to give public comment. Is this time that's supposed to be done?
No, all individuals that are here are for the next public hearing.
Okay, then, okay. Are there any further comments or questions from the public or anyone else who wishes to provide oral testimony on this matter? provide any further discussion or information in response to any oral or written testimony submitted in regards to the draft 2020 urban water management plan and the wastewater, plan or amendment?
No.
I hereby declare the public hearing closed and open the matter for discussion from the board. On behalf of the board, we want to thank the public for its participation in this matter. Any discussion or comments by the board? Director Byron.
Yes, thank you for the report. I thought it was, very thorough. And, there was a lot of positives. My question is, during, your review of the information, did you identify any threats, weaknesses, or concerns that we should be aware of?
That's an excellent question. So I do have a comment on that, and I, may want to be very conscientious of the answer here. One of the ways to look at the work that the district has done is to look at the water supplies as a savings account. And the goals in those situations is not necessarily to dip into your savings account unless you need to, or you have a very good opportunity to refill that account. The district has done a great job of refilling that account when it's used the water supplies. I would just encourage the district to continue its diligence in looking at these alternative supplies, for example, the Recycle Water Project, continue its diligence in looking at additional spreading basins, I think as it's doing with the Ames Valley groundwater basin, and to continue to create surplus. We are certainly entering potentially different times in terms of California water. We're seeing critical situations throughout the state. And for the district to have put itself in this situation is great, but it should continue to undertake this good work.
Thank you. I also noticed in the report, the section on water loss, in our district is over 13% water loss in a year. It seems to me that I recall that the goal would be to be at 6 or 8%, if I'm remembering correctly, getting older. Especially in drought times, do you see anything being mandated by the state that would penalize the district for having a higher than average water loss?
That's a good question. So I think you're correct in identifying that the water loss is a little bit high. I think there's an opportunity there to find some additional savings, potentially within system losses. Would the state take an action to essentially mandate a water loss reduction? And I think the answer to that is probably not. I'm not going to say never because I'm in the state of California, but at this time I think probably not. I think it might take a step, however, to encourage broader conservation savings, and the district might find additional savings to make up that broader conservation. Let's say it's 20% overall from your total demand through reducing system losses. So, and I'll turn this over to Mr. Young. I can tell he wants to speak on this. So go ahead, Greg.
I just want
Mine's
to
already on. I just hit the top one. You don't have to dial.
I just wanted to add one quick note that the numbers that are shown in the document represent apparent and real losses. So some of the apparent losses can be in meter calibration questions and other things. The state is working towards getting agencies to be in a better position, which will include maybe some further best management practices to assure that you are minimizing real losses as best you can.
Thank you.
Director McConnell.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just following up a little bit on Mr. Foley, we said remain diligent, conserve surplus water supplies. And on page 77 of the management plan, in stage 1, talks about the water alert. For example, some of the conserve prohibited water uses would include allowing water to run off unused or district drain, failing to repair or control leak, washing sidewalks, driveways, or parking areas, et cetera, et cetera. It almost seems like we should always be stage 1 alert to conserve water. Would that be unreasonable?
I don't think that's unreasonable at all. In fact, in some instances, there are prohibitions generally against any waste of water. I think that the district has those prohibitions, if I'm recalling correctly. But, a voluntary conservation standard is certainly a good standard to uphold.
Thank you.
Any other questions? What is the board's pleasure? We have three options. Motion to approve and adopt Resolution 21-11 and 2112 and 2113, and there will be a roll call on that. Number two is a motion to disapprove Resolution 21-11, 21-12, and/or 2113. Again, there would be a roll call. Number three is a motion to revise and approve Resolution 21-11, 21-12, and/or 21-13. And again, there would be a roll call vote. What is the pleasure of the board?
And I can also approve the water management plan.
All right. Is there a second?
I'll second that. That was mentioned separately, or?
We're gonna do them as one motion.
With one motion. All right. So there's been a motion that's been made by Vice President Huff, seconded by Director Byram. Roll call, please.
Director McCombs? President Mays?
Yes.
Vice President Huff?
Yes.
And Director Byron?
Yes.
Motion carried. And so we will approve and adopt all three of those areas. Let's go on to the next item. Let's go on to 3B, the public hearing, water standby assessments for fiscal year 2021-2022, presented by our general manager, Paul Fischel.
And, excuse me, if we could move right into the hearing, address specifics during the hearing.
All right. Let's go into the hearing. The procedure to be followed during the hearing will be as follows. Before opening the hearing for public testimony, staff will present its findings and recommendations relative to the proposed resolution under consideration, as well as any written protests to the board. The hearing will then be open to take public testimony and any questions or comments from the audience. The public hearing is being held in accordance with the law prior to fixed levy and collection of standby and availability in the district for the fiscal year 2021-2022. Any person may object, protest, or support the changes to Resolution 21-10 by filing a written objection, protest, or letter of support with Paul Fischel, General Manager of the district, or by addressing their comments to the Board of Directors at this hearing. I'd like to call on the district's General Manager to give a short summary of the actions that have led to this hearing now.
The district is required to hold a public hearing each year to continue standby charges. Notice of this public hearing has been noticed pursuant to California Water Code Section 31032.2. The notice was prepared and mailed to property owners subject to the charge. The standby charge has been assessed on all unimproved property without a meter in the High Desert Water District service area since 1969. Justification for the standby charge is that all properties within the boundaries of the district receive a certain benefit for the possibility of connecting to High Desert Water District's water supply. Therefore, a cost share toward the operation of the district is assigned to all properties within the district.
Mr. Secretary, will you report the contents of the record and give us a summary of any written communications regarding Resolution 21-10?
Mr. President, contains three elements. One, a copy of the public hearing notice mailed to property owners. Two, letters received from the public, which there were none received. We did receive a number of phone calls, which we addressed those questions. The third item, Jonathan will provide an overview and summary.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. So, each year, the district goes through a process of having a standby public hearing, which started way back in the 90s. So, if a property owner has a vacant property that is within 2640 feet of an existing high desert water district pipeline, the property owner is charged $20 for the first unimproved lot up to 2.5 acres and $10 for each acre afterwards, not to exceed $1,000. If a property located outside 2,640 feet, the amount of $4 is charged for each unimproved lot or per acre, not to exceed $1,000. The district has been doing this for almost 30 years with no rate increases. But as part of the public process, we do send out notifications to all property owners that we will conduct a public hearing to prove the charges in the property tax bill. That concludes my report. Thank you.
Will the Secretary please read any written communication received regarding the proposed changes to fees and charges?
No written communications were received.
I declare the public hearing open. The board will now receive testimony from the public. I ask those who wish to speak to please approach the podium, give your name and town of residence for the record, and limit your comments to 3 minutes or less.
Everybody got a podium, state your name, and have 3 minutes. Okay? Standing right here. Please state your name and where you're located.
Please speak into the microphone so we can all hear and it can be recorded.
My name is Irvin Craig. I live at 6739 Lindbergh Lane, Yucca Valley, right on the airport. I own my home there. The adjoining lot I've owned since 1974. I don't plan to have a water meter on that lot since my house is next door to it. I wonder if there's a way that I can get an exemption so I don't have to pay the standby charges. I bought my lot in 1974. I asked for a water meter, and they wouldn't allow us to have water meters for years. Then when they finally allowed water meters to be let up, they made several $1,000 charge for it. So I don't have a water meter on my lot, I don't plan to have one. I just wonder if there's some way to get this assessment fee waived.
Any questions? General Manager?
I'm not aware of a process that we currently have for waiving fees. I would say we can take something of this nature into consideration and see what there might be for possibility. I will mention in general, though, the intent of this isn't just for now. The intent is for the future property owners. And what was reviewed back in 1969 was the ability to utilize that infrastructure. So there is a relatively small fee for most parcels that is intended to pay for that infrastructure that exists. So that when there is a meter installed, it doesn't include a large charge for a proportionate charge of all the other infrastructure. That was the theory back in 1969, and this was implemented. That's just to give you the history in terms of why the charges were imposed.
Well, I understand. I just want to go on record about this and see if there's anything to be done. If we can, fine, if we can't. I'd like to make one more comment. We had a water meter a lot down the street from us. It started leaking. It leaked for 3 weeks. I called 3 times to try to get somebody to come and fix the leak. It was on your side of the meter. Why didn't it come out and fix it? The 3 weeks to fix the water leak. And the other thing I noticed on the right of way, there are tumbleweeds growing there. Those weeds get big and they break loose and run over onto the airport runway. And an
information and your interest.
Cody, we should probably take a wipe and wipe down the podium.
Sure.
After each person to be on the paper side. There you go, we do that. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Colbert.
Thank you, Doug. Appreciate it.
Obviously, it's not up to the podium, will have you state your name and the city that you reside.
Hello, my name is Renuka Hayes. My husband is James Hayes. We live in Brea, California. Yes, I'm Renuka Hayes, and this is my husband James Hayes. We reside in Brea, California.
Do you have any
Is the
comments?
property located in Napa Valley?
Yes, we own a 10-acre piece of land in Yucca Valley and Moonlight Mesa. It's raw land, there are no structures on the land, there's no water, there's nothing, it's just raw land. And, I do not vote for having standby charges. I don't quite understand what standby charges are, if you could explain.
I can explain the standby charges. Back in 1969, that's when the standby charges started being assessed. And they were assessed for all properties that had the possibility of connecting to High Desert Water District's water supply. And that was seen as a benefit because there was all of the infrastructure installed to supply properties. So it's a fee that was charged to all properties that weren't connected but have the potential to connect to pay a proportionate share of that. So rather than at a later time, if a current parcel that is not hooked up decides to, they would not have to pay a proportionate share of that existing infrastructure, which is the main infrastructure that High Desert Water District manages and maintains.
As far as I know, there is no nearby connections that we could connect to receive water. It is mostly uphill, and there are no roads, and there are no type of lines, water lines that we could use to connect water.
Can you get the address?
Could we get your address?
My home address,
No,
the property address, I do not have the information here.
I mean, I have,
But it is Moonlight Mesa, my name is Renuka Hayes.
and afterwards, we'll speak with you so we can get the proper information, so we can look into that.
Okay, and I pay the tax that I get every year. Hi, my name is Renee again. My question is, thank you for that explanation, I appreciate that. What is the percentage versus those who are already connected with the utilities such as water, et cetera, versus those who are not, that may be in the future from that 1969 proposal? What if, like, if they're paying 0.1% of what the entire bill is, and then the people who are going to be proposed for having the installation in the future, are they paying 1/10, are they paying the same percentage as the others, are they paying less? Is this going to be still divided and accumulated together on future dates?
At this time, and I'm not sure if we have a percentage answer right now. Probably have to do a look back to see how that was exactly determined. In terms of the actual amount, we do have records of that. So we could probably look at it and provide an explanation along the lines of what you're describing. We'd have to look at it to see to what level we'd be able to refine that. It does go back quite a ways, so we would have to look at some of the records.
charge is actually $95 per year
Yeah, but that was not enforced, right, for this
for your
year?
10 acres.
So $95 a year for 10 acres?
Yes.
Okay, and then in the future, when we get water, if we do develop the land, it goes up according to how much water we use, right?
Yes.
All right, thank you, we appreciate it.
I have
Your
one
comments?
question. Has that $95 charge been enforced just this, according to this meeting and going into the future, or has it been charged in the past? I'm sorry to be so ignorant on the topic, so just learning.
It's been charged in the past. In fact, it was the same amount last year, and, there was a charge in previous years since 1969, there have been charges.
Okay, so it's just continuation then?
Yes,
Do you anticipate that the charge will go up?
And just would like to give you a side note that there were no rate increases for the last, 30 years.
Thank you.
Mr. President, I wish to run with any public comment.
Is there any other public comments?
Do this it.
That is it. All right, okay, let's go on. Had any further comments or questions from the public? If not, I declare the public hearing closed and open discussion from the board. On behalf of the board, we want to thank the public for your participation in this matter. Any discussion or comments by the board? Any comments, questions by board members? Seeing none, hearing none, no hands, no identification. What is the board's pleasure now? Options are, number one is motion to adopt resolution 21-10 and take a roll call. Or number two, motion to disapprove, resolution 21-10. Or number three is motion to revise and approve resolution 21-10 and take a roll call vote.
I'll make the motion to approve and adopt.
Okay, is there a second? Second. It's been moved by Vice President Kopp and seconded by Director Byram to, adopt resolution 21-10. Roll call, please.
Director Sam?
Yes.
Director McComb?
Yes.
President May?
Yes.
Vice President Huff?
Yes.
Director Byron?
Yes.
Okay, let's go on to number, 3C, and this is the, resolution number 21-14. It's the, 2021-2022 water budget. And presenting this is our Assistant General Manager of Administration, Jonathan Evadisco.
Thank you, President May. So, on June 16th, the water budget was presented to the full board as a workshop. A separate presentation was, made to the Finance and Audit Committee on June 28th, where we have discussed the changes to the water budget, which are shown in this page. So we have removed a half-year budget for the Public Information Officer and the Admin Assistant. 2, for the admin building, we have removed, so the district will not move forward with CATEL. So there was a reduction in the state lobbyist for CWSA, because of an error, which we have determined that, CWSA will just charge us for $5,000 for the full year instead of $60,000 for the entire year. So the total modifications to the budget accounted for $230,000. And, in addition to the water budget, staff, prepared a preliminary, rough draft cash flow projections through, 2026. Okay, so this report was presented also to the Finance and Audit Committee last Monday. So, if you look at the, close to the, final, line item, so the cash and cash equivalents, projected reserve, from 2022 to 2026 will, increase if, the district will maintain, our spending, and if our projected revenue will come into fruition, which is more than the target reserve per the rate study. Also this morning, as a side note, staff had a great conversation with, BBK. So currently, BBK is, providing us with federal lobbying services, and we were given 5 months of free service from May through September 2021. So BBK provided an option to include their REST state lobbying services and to review for future grant applications starting October 1st of this year. We anticipate that there would be no additional amount to the budget. And, our GM, Paul, will, provide some insights about what we have discussed this morning.
We did discuss that with, BB&K and potential options about modifying the contract, making it very specific to our needs, and we're going to work through those details, and depending on how things, come about, we would be bringing it to the board for future consideration for potential approval. As Jonathan mentioned, it's budgeted, that doesn't mean it will be approved, but that would be in essence a line item approval for that contract.
So, I'll be happy to answer any questions following public comment.
Are there any emails or any phone, calls that you'd like to express?
We received no emails, and is there anybody online that would like to have public comment at this time?
Hearing none, I bring it back to the board. Is there any questions or comments from directors? Director McComb.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just one question, Jonathan. From 2022 to 2023, revenues over expenses. In that 1 year, the revenue over expenses jumps $346,000. And the next year, kind of flattens out, it jumps $44,000 in 2024, and then stays relatively within $8 or so thousand in the ensuing years. So what's that big jump in revenue from?
So Director McComb, that's a great question. So in 2022, we have a one-time lease payment for the Morongo Basin pipeline of $304,000, and we will no longer have that payment in the succeeding years. And assumptions were made, which is consistent to the rate study for the following years.
That's a big deal. That plan will be paid off. And remember when I first started, we first were assessed, that was a big burden. And here we are, it's paid off, and it reminds me of something somebody said out in life. They were in a similar situation when they first put in their sewer. People felt the pain, and in the last few years, I guess, their 30-year plan was up, and their sewer's paid for it, so we'll get there. The sewer.
That's proof. Director Barrett, did you have a comment or question?
I just wanted to thank Jonathan, Tanya, answering all of my questions the other day. It was very helpful to me, and I appreciate the response. Thank you.
Yeah, likewise, Director Byron, we appreciate all your questions, and it really helped us, explain more on our side about what we have on our budget. Thank you.
Any questions over here?
Just a quick comment, I'd like to also thank staff for putting together a very, positive, conservative, budget for us.
And, also, I would like to thank, our controller, Tanya Gula, for, helping us, with the budget. Thank you.
It's wonderful to, have $300 and some thousand saved too. That was a nice gesture too. So we look at all of those things. We need a motion and a second to adopt this.
I'll make a motion to approve and adopt.
Is there a second? It's been moved by Vice President Huff and seconded by Director McComb. Roll call, please.
Director Byron?
Yes.
Director Statham?
Yes.
President Hayes?
Yes.
Vice President Huff?
Yes.
And Director McComb?
Let's go on to 3D, and that is, resolution number 21-15, for the year, 2021-2022 wastewater budget. Presenting this is our, Assistant General Manager of Administration, Jonathan Avedisco.
Thank you again, President May. So same with the water budget. The wastewater budget was presented to the full board and the finance committee on June 16th and June 28th. There were no changes to the wastewater budget since the workshop and after the finance committee. I'll be happy to answer any questions following public comments.
Are there any emails or anyone on the phone that would like to make comments?
We received no emails, and any participants online that would like to speak have opportunity at this time.
I don't hear anyone, so we'll bring it back to the board. If there are any comments that you would like to make about this, wastewater budget? Any questions, comments? If not, I'll entertain a motion and a second.
I'll make a motion.
Okay? Is there a second?
Second.
Is that you?
I
I don't know.
was gonna pull this down so you can hear me.
Okay, this is moved by Vice President House and seconded by Director Byron, I'm assuming. And roll call, please.
Director Byron?
Yes.
Director Statham?
Yes.
Director McComb?
Yes.
President Hayes?
Yes.
Vice President Huff?
Yes.
Let's go on to Director's reports and comments, and we'll start over with Director Statham. Nothing. Vice President House.
I have nothing.
Director McComb.
Thank you. One report, I attended the special legislative committee meeting on June 29th. Of note was an agenda item presented by our general manager, Paul Sechel, where in lieu of hiring a state lobbyist to help the district with policy and regulatory legislation, the state level, the district is contracting with the Community Water Systems Alliance to keep the district up to date on those matters. The yearly contract amount of community water systems is $5,000, and Paul, anything you want to add? Or you want to save, would you rather save it for your report?
I'll take it from her.
That's the end of my report, thank you.
Director Byron.
Yes, I attended the special finance committee meeting on January 28th to discuss the budgets. The special legislative committee meeting on the 29th that Director McComb just talked about. And also, I would just like to commend the longtime board members and staff for having the forethought and understanding the importance of water, source of water and water supply, and taking the steps necessary to build this tremendous reserve that's been built that secures water for our residents through 2045. It's tremendous. Congratulations.
It has been a team effort. All the staff has worked together and the board has worked together, and we've always had a policy of, if there's water available, get it. Anyway, let's go on with the manager's reports. Then we have Assistant General Manager of Administration, Jonathan Tedesco.
Thank you, President Mays. From our last board meeting, when President Mays was presenting the board report, a question came up about the inactive meters. So most of the inactive meters are mostly fire flow meters, and the district is not charging any fee, including any flat service charge.
Thank you. And roll for compliance.
I have no comments tonight, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Roll. And Ms. Nick
I have nothing to report, thank you.
and Tony Culver, Assistant General Manager of Operations.
Nothing further tonight, thanks.
And we have over there, we have, Doug Culver, Chief Plant Operator,
Have nothing to report, thank you.
and General Manager Paul Fischel.
I did have 3 or 4 items I want to speak to. And this is a bit of a reiteration from the budget and a follow-up on to Director McCone's legislative committee update. So we will be coming back to the board after further discussions with BB&K. And we do not plan to have them take on the general lobbying effort of regulatory policy, because that will be covered through the Community Water Systems Alliance. But in order to hopefully leverage funding as much as possible, that's what we're looking at leveraging BB&K from a state standpoint for. So that's just a little more edification on the purpose of that. That would be the primary additional focus with them. And again, the intent of the contract would be to have them truly focus on our needs. And I will add to that, my impression is, having worked with previous lobbyists, I have been impressed by the cost that I see relative to other lobbyists, the focus that they have, and really honing in on our needs. So we'll see if that comes to fruition, but that's my initial impression with them. So it would basically be modifying the current contract, and we'll come back to the board once we've sorted through that. That's with regard to the legislative. I also wanted to provide an update on COVID. There's been a lot of discussions on that. And I have some notes here I'd like to speak to. So, because High Desert Water District is not requiring disclosure of vaccination status, absent any future state guidance affecting High Desert Water District's current status, current High Desert District water guidelines associated with staff remain the same, except that we are now required to provide N95 masks to staff that request it. So basically, everything is going to remain the same with regard to staff, except for the requirement to have masks. Our intent is to also maintain the office closed to the public until further notice. We feel that's the best way to handle that, because in terms of the OSHA requirements of maintaining offices and staff with masks, if we allow the public to generally come in, it wouldn't be consistent. So that's also the intent there. And although the office will remain closed to the public, entities under contract or with potentially entering into contract, there we would intend to allow them into the office as long as they're meeting appropriate protocols. With regard to board meetings, that does have a little bit of a uniqueness to it. Now, we had a little bit of a variation obviously today, but they will be closed to the public through September 30th, with the exception of individuals attending for agendized items as occurred today. After September 30th, board meetings will be required to be open to the public. So there, High Desert Water District staff will maintain current COVID-19 protocols at the board meetings. But the board members themselves and non-High Desert Water District attendees, such as the public, will not be required to social distance nor wear masks if they have been vaccinated. And High Desert Water District will not verify vaccination status. As such, the decision to wear a mask and social distance will be at the discretion of board members and non-High Desert Water District attendees. So this has been something we've sorted through with legal in the really the best approach we can take under these kind of confusing guidelines. So that's our intended approach with regard to the COVID-19. Yes.
You know, I want to really thank, you, Doug, for lighting this podium. I think that's going to be really important, if we do allow people in here. And my world is a really tight world because everything has to be wiped down all the time. And so even some of the things we think about, just Cody is trying to grab, the doorknobs after other people have touched. For your safety, it might be a good idea to make sure we're wiping down the doorknobs and things, just so you're not touching the doorknob if somebody's touching and you're touching your eyes. So again, my world is a little different, but probably a lot more stringent than here, but I think the more stringent things we can do here to protect the staff would be better, just trying to look around and look at those little tiny things, wiping down, not touching doorknobs are probably the biggest challenge that we have to be more careful with that. So I'm going to protect you also. So thank you, Doug.
And we'll talk about these things, make sure we are prepared in advance to incorporate some of the things you described, and it will make my wife happy.
Thank you. Anything else?
I do have one other thing. I did have a meeting today at lunch. There was the annual Basin-wide Foundation. They asked me about joining the board. So I'm going to look over what the Basin-wide Foundation entails. I think Bob could probably speak to that somewhat, but I'm considering joining the board. And I think that, I know the other thing is later. That's all I have.
All right. I don't think there's any other questions and comments. At this point, are there any upcoming agenda items that you would like to ask?
You know, I actually would, and we bring this up often, and, in the past, we've moved it around. You know, it might be interesting to investigate the time frame of the meeting again, from a perspective of maybe trying to make it a little earlier, maybe 4 o'clock, wasn't that, maybe some of the other directors might think about that. So maybe we could bring that up as future agenda items, to change the time, maybe kind of a nice thing to at least look at. We should look at it every now and then, it might be a nice thing to look at.
I'm lobbying for consistency. Like 4 o'clock.
I don't care, pick one. Bob, actually, we didn't want you here. That's why we didn't want to break your heart. That's the reason we're not.
All right. Well, thank you. And at this time, we'll go into closed session. Public employee performance evaluation, government code 54957, title general manager.